my end. Can
Yes,
you see
yes.
me? Is the
Yes, I
light
can
okay?
see you. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll switch off the camera.
Yeah, please.
Саламатсыздар ма?
Саламатсыз ба?
Саламатсыз ба?
Қалымжан, қалың қалай?
Жақсы, шүкір.
Әлем Манатына
Рахмет.
қалыңыз қалай?
Өздеріңіз қалайсыздар?
Сағат 14-15-те бастаймыз ба? 1 минуттан кейін.
Иә.
Аха. Жақсы.
Минуттан кейін, 9 минуттан кейін бастаймыз.
Ау?
9 минуттан кейін бастаймыз.
Жақсы.
Good morning, guys. Let's check it out who's attending today's class. It relates only to my students. Так, ребята, давайте мы проверим, кто сейчас из моих студентов на сегодняшней лекции. Айгерим.
I'm here.
Okay. Бахытгуль.
Здравствуйте, я здесь.
Бахытгуль. Дана.
Здравствуйте.
Дана, вы здесь? Dana.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Okay, that's great. Balum?
I'm here.
Aida?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, Aida. Gulnur?
Здравствуйте, я здесь.
Здравствуйте. Нургуль? Нургуль?
Да, здравствуйте, я здесь.
Отлично. Анель? Анель?
Она вот подключается сейчас.
Хорошо. Карина?
Hello, I'm here.
Нариман?
I'm here.
So, start, Mr. Kureshi. So, thank you for your today's lecture, and let me introduce our guests. I mean, Gulmira Asherbekova. She's from the university. So, she's the head of the Department of Journalism and Political Science. And many students from different faculties, and especially international journalism. So, good morning, guys. In London, it's 15 past 8, quarter past 8, and today's our guest is Mr. Shahid Kureshi, Dr. Shahid Kureshi. He's a senior analyst with BBC and chief editor of the London Post. He writes terrorism, foreign policy. He also appears as analyst on Al Jazeera, Press TV, NBC, Kazakh TV, LBC Radio London. So he has written a famous book, War on Terror and Siege of Pakistan, published in 2009. At Government College, Lahore, he wrote his MA thesis on political thought of Imam Khomeini and visited Tehran University. His PhD in political psychology and law at the British. He also speaks at Cambridge University. He was visiting professor at Hebei University in China. So, Dr. Shahid Kureshi, let's start.
Спасибо.
Good morning to you in Nur Sultan. I hope you can hear me. If you can, please.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so good morning and thank you for inviting me to your class. I attended one of the sessions in 2018 when I was in Astana. And it's a great pleasure to speak to you, and your lecturer, Professor Glamjohn, is a friend of mine. He's in London for some times. Today's topic we decided to speak about is is a very current one. You hear these words very regularly on social media, on TV all the times, especially on Twitter. It's called fake news. So today's I decided to speak about is the social, economic, and political impact of fake news. So we need to know what is fake news and what is false news. So as a journalist, I started as a reporter, as a field journalist, field reporter. So my work was mainly going into the press conferences and going in the field. So I'm not a drawing room journalist. I'm kind of a field person who will go in the field and verify the stories, and then you will publish it, keeping in view the public sentiments and public safety and those elements. Because as a journalist, we come across so much information, but we have to keep in mind that what information we are sharing with the public, is the information is accurate, is it authentic, is it true, and not only is it in the public good if we publish it or broadcast it. So for example, we need to be sensitive about communities. If a news is about any communities, so we need to understand the difference between freedom of speech and the sensitivity of the communities. We can't use our freedom of speech in the tool to upset any community, any religious community. I'll just give you the latest examples we have. For example, in France, they were showing the cartoons of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which was very upsetting to the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world. And this is not freedom of speech. This is, of course, a kind of how the Muslims felt. It was like an attack on their religion and on their sentiments, because Prophet Muhammad obviously is the most respected personality in the Muslim world and for the Muslims. So that was happening in France. But at the same time, what we see in Europe especially, that if anyone want to talk about Holocaust, where millions of people were killed, Jews, Gypsies, and various other communities were killed by the Nazis during the Second World War. In some countries, if you speak about it, you will go to prison. For example, in Germany and other countries, if you even ask a question about it, they will put you in prison. So the freedom of speech is a little bit tainted in terms of in Europe, how they see freedom of speech in one situation and how they see the freedom of speech in another situation. So that was like my intro. Journalist as a responsible editor, if you have a news, so be sensitive about it. And this is, I'm talking about when you have all the facts. And for example, in the United Kingdom, when we have any issues going around for example, there's a police operation going on, and but we just don't publish or don't broadcast any information. If there is an ongoing police operation, we will contact the police press office and we'll ask their feedback if they are willing to share the information, or they will make a press release later on, because as a journalist, our actions could jeopardize an ongoing operation against the terrorists or criminals or drugs, whatever the operation security services are doing. So these are responsibility of a journalist to avoid any accurate news and true news, instead of planting any fake news or any false news. So now coming to the topic, the fake news term we use quite regularly at the moment. At the moment, we are going through in media, which is we call fourth and fifth generation psychological warfare, and that warfare is a hybrid war in which the media and the sometimes state, sometimes military, sometimes various other actors, they work together. And so media is becoming more and more important in terms of preparing the mindset of the general public. So that is, in the older days, it used to be called propaganda. So the propaganda continues, but its shape has changed because of the latest tools we have. Now we have Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. So these are the tools available. And one more thing which I'd like to say here. If a product is free, then you are the product, which means if WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, or other tools, applications, they are free, then they are using your data, they are looking at your likes and dislikes. You must have seen that if you, for example, want to buy some socks, you will start having advertisements about socks in your Facebook page, or if you're looking for some something with your household equipment, you will start getting those. So this is the use of artificial intelligence in terms of monitoring you. What is it you like, what you're buying, what you're selling, what you're looking at even. So these are the things which are happening in the media atmosphere. And we have, in UK, for example, there were companies who were involved in terms of preparing the minds of people. For example, in US elections, we have seen in the previous US election, we've seen how the Twitter played a role in terms of preparing the minds of the masses of the general public. We, in the current environment, as we are speaking now, at the moment, there is a conflict going on between India and China in the border region of Ladakh, which is about 15,000 feet is the highest border. The temperature will be like -20 or more at the moment as we speak. So what the Chinese are doing now is they're playing Punjabi Indian songs on the border with big speakers for the Indian soldiers. Now you will be wondering why Chinese will be playing Indian songs on the border on a language which they don't speak or they don't probably understand. And the reason behind is that to demoralize the soldiers who are fighting in a -20 harsh conditions, harsh situations. And when they listen to their songs, of their local folk songs, they feel homesick, they think about their families, they think about their friends, and they lose the will to fight. So this is like all psychological manipulation they are doing in this case. I'll take you a little bit back in 2002, and that time when weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, this term was used widely in the press, and that was linked with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq by Saddam Hussein, which never existed actually. And even for some reason, the US Secretary of State, General Colin Powell, was even used or misled when he went to the UN Security Council with a small bottle and he said there could be a attack or preparation could be done in 45 minutes. So people were hearing attack, 45 minutes, weapons of mass destruction, etc. But now we know, later on we found out that it was all false. It was all fake. But at the time, there was an attack on Iraq. The country was almost destroyed. Millions of people got killed. The economy is totally gone into collapse. And this is the country we're talking, which was very rich in oil resources, in education. They were very high in the whole of Middle East. As a result, they lost almost 500,000 children at the time. The whole country is in ruin. So if we analyze it, how it happened, so the ground was prepared on the basis of incorrect facts, and then the public opinion was created in their home countries, especially NATO and other Western countries who were responsible for these attacks. And then one thing led to another. Same thing happened, for example, in after 9/11, we saw the word came very popular was war on terror, but now we don't hear anything about it. So war on terror was as a result of there was terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in United States, where 3,000 people got killed. That is a fact. But there was another fact that how come the 15 security agencies and intelligence agencies, they all failed to protect the lives and limbs and the properties of the people. But nobody was asking this question in US media or in Western media, that how come you all failed? How come the US Air Force failed when these planes were flying around for over 2 hours, or they gone missing? There was no action. But in any country, for example, in Kazakhstan or wherever you have, they also have something called IF, identify friends and foes. And if any aeroplane enter commercial or fighter enter in your airspace, within 2 minutes you are supposed to respond, and if not, then they will send the Air Force jets to check it out what it is. For example, there were incidents in Moscow. Some commercial airplane, the pilot was he forgot to inform the control tower that they are in Russian airspace, and they failed to identify their identity. And so the Russian Air Force went in and they asked the plane to land in Moscow. So these are but having said that, I'm just trying to bring your attention that any incident have so many things in the background, and any good journalist will investigate all these facts before they go for a story. They will ask questions. Nobody's going to blame you, or nobody's going to tell you that why are you asking these questions. You have every right to ask questions. And when people ask questions, it brings more clarity. And that's what we are here for. We bring more clarity. So that we are not becoming part of any propaganda of any country or any government or any company, for example. For example, in contract law in UK, when we were studying contract law, it was if you're selling a product, so you are telling the people that if you buy this product, it will give you these benefits, for example. So you are telling the buyer that if you take my paracetamol or my painkiller, it will give you these benefits. But also the companies who make those medicine, or they will also make a leaflet which will be available with the medication. So that is to check if the companies who's making it, are they making any false claims, or is the product which they are selling saying what it is or what they are saying to people. So these are these things are linked with the individuals. That, for example, if there are any, the company needs you that if you take this medication, there will be side effects which will be of this kind, or if they are if medication you need to take before breakfast, or don't use alcohol when you are taking this medication, or don't drive, for example. So these are the information which is the responsibility of the manufacturer to give it to you as a consumer. So to avoid making any false claim about your product could lead you into the court for damages, or for any accidents, or for, if there is any problem, they can go to court and they can sue the company. So these are the laws we have in the United Kingdom. For example, even if they are having a sale, which a lot of people like doing shopping, so they will, when they in UK, when they are having a sale, they will write in a small print saying while the stock lasts, which means we're going to have a sale in our shop until our stocks finish, which means the sale is not forever. So there is an end time, and there will be information already provided to you. So these are the things which we have seen more recently, last 5-6 years. With regards to fake news, for example, this is a term which was used by President Trump quite regularly, and he was shooting down everything said about him as a fake news, which could be true, which could be verified, could be checked. But then if there is a false news, which is totally wrong, which is totally untrue. So we as a journalist, or you as a student, or when you will be going in the field, it's your role to verify what you're writing. Is it true? Is it and you the famous W's we have: why, which, when, where, etc. So these are our responsibilities to clear out any kind of stuff and bring in the facts we have. Because if you bring in the facts, nobody's going to blame you. Or if you ask questions, nobody's going to say to you, why are you asking the question? But if you don't ask the question, and if you sit somewhere and you make a story or make a statement which is damaging to anyone, then there could be consequences. In terms of the economic impact of fake news or false news, is that if there is a news about the starting of a conflict or any incident, major incident in any region, for example, in Middle East, or that could affect the oil prices. And when it affects the oil prices, then it will go to the stock exchange. And the stock exchange, the shareholders will be looking for, and the companies who are using, they could lose the profit. So, for example, you must have seen last 2-3 months after the COVID crisis, the oil prices went into minus, which means you could buy oil for free. Companies were minus, mean you don't need to pay anything because the oil production was continuing. You cannot stop the machine which is producing the oil, and they need to store it somewhere. And that has happened in last like 6 months. We have seen it happening, and then slowly the oil prices have come back, and the economy, people were not using oil because they were housebound. There were no transport. The planes were not flying because of this. So our role as a journalist is to verify the facts, and also not becoming the tool of any organization or any government, for example. So it is also important to find out which side you are on. There are always sides. So if you are a government PR representative, or if you are an editor of an independent newspaper, or if you are editor of a government-owned newspaper, so there are all limits you have, which information. But as you know, the revolution with social media tools bring in, they have kind of broke the monopoly of the big media houses around the world. So people are not dependent on information coming from a single source or big organization. People are sharing information on the tools more swiftly and fastly than it was happening in 20 years ago. During the Second World War, we saw in the military barracks, they used to be like blackboards, and they used to write information on those blackboards, the news, what has happened, like 5, 6, 7 points which was happening, which they want to tell the soldiers what was happening. Now everyone has a mobile phone in their pocket, and that mobile phone is doing everything from shopping, from communication, texting, and also sharing information. So one information can go to thousands of miles away within seconds. So so it's very hard to stop people knowing about things, whether they are true or not true, that is another matter. It's the flow of information is very fast, and in some places, for example, in China, they don't use Facebook or WhatsApp or YouTube. They have their own alternative sources. So these, for example, the Facebook has its own policy. They don't publish or they kind of censor, as reported on the issues of Palestinian atrocities committed by the Israelis. They kind of deleted some, as we saw the report. So those big organizations, they have their own agenda as well. And as I said earlier on, if a product is free, then you are the product. So if you look at the Facebook page and you look at you go into the other applications which are part of the Facebook, they will tell you exactly about you. And this is the platform where people are sharing information voluntarily. Nobody is asking them to share. People sharing their pictures, people sharing their breakfast, lunch, and dinner, people sharing their pictures of their children, their gatherings. So people are volunteering their information on a platform, and that platform is analyzing their likes and dislikes and sending information about the products they are more interested in. So this is very psychological. And then we have another thing coming in, which is we know as like bots. These are robots who are created by some some IT specialists, basically to say that you have 1 million followers or you have 2 million followers, and when you analyze it, then you realize that they were not real; they were all fake. I had information about some journalists following of Twitter accounts, and then I found out that majority of the over 1 million followers were fake. They never communicated. They were just there. So these are people, or these are the accounts created in bulk. I mean, there was a joke on Facebook that the population of women on Facebook is more than the actual population of women in the world, because people were creating Facebook accounts or putting a woman's picture or various kind of silly things happening on the Facebook tool. I mean, I'm sure there are other tools, Instagram, for example. So all these tools are made to prepare your mind. And then there's another thing which we know. People are becoming very anxious, and people are looking at the phones all the time. You must have seen it in or maybe you're doing yourself, that you have a phone in your pocket, and then after every few minutes you bring your phone out, you look at it, what's happening, and then you put it back. And then people are getting into FMO. FMO is fear of missing out, as you're thinking that if you don't look at your phone, you're going to miss out something. So this calmness, and that is creating a lot of anxiety in people. Even people are sometimes, I also see that because I'm in a different time zone and I have friends in various parts of the world, and they will wake up in the middle of the night and they will message, they will reply to a message, and I ask them, well, shouldn't you be sleeping? They said, yeah, I woke up for to have some water, and I thought I replied to you. So people are becoming very anxious, and that is creating a lot of psychological issues. So can you imagine these things which are happening in real time, and if somebody put a false or a fake information, and then it go through the rumor mill, which I remember when I was a student in psychology, we checked out how the rumor spread. So the experiment we did was that one person will tell the story to another, and then that person will go inside and tell the same story. And what we realized that after the fifth person, the story which was originally told was totally changed. So this is because of the person who is listening to your story. And that's how the rumor spread, that something which was told in the beginning, and when the other person told the other person, so then this is not a criticism on anyone. This is about what was person's interest into that story, and that goes into the domain of gossip, or I don't have the words for it, but this is how the rumor spread. Rumor means that something goes on into domain of people which is not true, or which is half true, or which is merely a mere puff, which means there was a very little information. By the time it's like somebody said to you, I saw a snake, and it was 5 centimeters. And by the time it reached to the fifth person, the length of the snake is increasing. And by the time the fifth person knows about it, the length of the snake is about 1 meter or 2 meters, or the size goes bigger. That's how the story from one person to another person goes. And same thing happened that sometimes we receive information on our WhatsApp or other tools, and we share it with other people without verifying it. And then it goes into hundreds and thousands before, and then we realize that it was not true, all of it. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take questions from you. Is that okay, Ghalamjon?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. So thank you for your lecture, Dr. Kureshi. It was really interesting. So we have many students from our university. Also, we have tutors from the university. So guys, if you have any questions, please ask.
May I?
Yes, please. Aygirim.
Hi, my name is
Introduce
Aygirim.
yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Aygirim. I'm a student of Eurasian National University. I want to ask, during COVID-19, we had a lot of fake news in our country, and people believed in them despite the fact that it was an outright lie and manipulation. How to fight spread and how to increase media literacy of the older generation?
Well, that is a very good question. The flow of information, the way we are facing this COVID is very much where the media and the governments have uncertain times. The media is depending on authorities, what they say about it, and experts, and how this virus was the speed of the virus was maybe not as fast as the news going around. And can you imagine that? What is the precaution to keep yourself safe? Wash your hands. That's the message. So washing your hands doesn't need any rocket science into it. So that was the message. But people were probably looking for something more stringent, and that kind of led to curfews and lockdowns, and people were profiting from it. For example, I hear that some pharmaceutical companies were hoarding the medication, paracetamol, which is required for this initially because there was no drug available to deal with this. So that is a good example of how the people reacted when they were expecting the information from someone from government who doesn't have any information. So I just give you one example. For example, you're going somewhere, and then you realize you're going in the wrong direction. So what will you do? You carry on walking, or option 2 is you stop there and option 3 is you go back where you started. So the option 3 was that you go back where you started instead of going into the wrong direction or keep walking into a wrong direction. So you go back where you started. So initially, when we especially hear about this coronavirus and COVID, there was a lot of speculation. And then, so what we realized was that what the doctors and scientists were saying was that you wash your hands and you keep a distance from each other. And the people who had underlying conditions, they get, because I see in your country, for example, in Kazakhstan, a lot of people, I have a lot of friends who lost their relatives. Your type of COVID was linked with a lot of pneumonia symptoms. And the corona we have here was also linked with the lungs, with breathing difficulties. So there was a information which you and I cannot understand because we are not scientists, so we are not doctors. So we are depending someone who can simplify the information for us and tell us what to do. And they themselves didn't know what to do. So the first thing they can, okay, wash your hands, put a mask on. So these were the harm reduction precautions, which can reduce the harm but cannot rectify the danger, the risk. The risk is already there. Is you need to keep yourself safe. Same like you have electric appliances, switch fire at your home. You don't put your finger into a electric switch. Basically, you know you're going to be electrocuted, or you don't put your finger in the. Or if you have a hot plate, you don't pick up the hot plate with your bare hands. Obviously, use something, piece of cloth or anything to pick it up. So these were the things which message was conveyed to people. And I don't want to get into the conspiracy theories here, but not always everything said was untrue, or not everything said was fully true. So people were in a state of confusion. And in that state of confusion, the best policy was to stay where you are. And then when the things were a little bit calmed down, and a lot of people who were cured or who were able to remove the symptoms were self-isolating. They stayed home, and the whole thing went away. A virus which can be killed by washing hands doesn't require a lot of science about it. But again, it was about keeping yourself safe. So the responsibility of the individual was much more than the government's responsibility. Government can't have a policeman standing outside everyone's door. So that's why they were using all the tools, and there was a saying to you, and they simplified the message as much as you could. We have signs of 2 meter distance, then we have come into 1 meter distance. People are anxious. There were some mental health diseases reported in France, for example, as a result of corona. People are protesting. And it's kind of a sign of mistrust when people don't trust their governments or their authorities that what they're telling is true or not true. But if you're in a state of confusion, when you don't know what is true or what is not true, is best to keep yourself safe. It's like Russian roulette, or it's like those games. So you don't know which direction could hurt you. So the best thing is to stay where you are, to keep yourself safe. I hope it was okay for you, Agrim.
So
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you so much. So Nurgul has a question. Nurgul?
Hello, Mr. Kureshi. Thank you for finding some time, and it was quite a useful information we could get. And my question is, where or what or what kind of countries do journalists have to hide the truth, have to change the information like the most? Thank you.
The journalists are not prosecutors. We are not courts. We are not lawyers. We are not judges. Our role is to and there are always two sides of the story. So in all the countries, for example, in USA, which we think is a beacon of freedom of speech, which is not true. There's a book written by a German scholar recently, which was not translated into English, as I know, and that is called Rent a Journalist. And the book says, and I mean, it will be available on our London Post website, you can check. It's called Rent a Journalist. And that says about there were 500 journalists who were recruited or who were available for the CIA operations. And the journalists from the author claims that the journalists, there was an agreement between US media, big media houses and the CIA that they can use their journalists as and when they require. So my truth is different than your truth. And so there is no such thing as we could say that Western countries have more freedom of speech than the post-Soviet Republic, for example, Kazakhstan or Iraq or Middle East. It's not about the media is very selective in terms of which information to give it to your public or which to manipulate or which to change. And that is something very subjective. For example, no matter what a government says, people will still have the information, but that will be other sources than the coming from the authorities, for example. So people in Kazakhstan will have up-to-date information from WhatsApp, from Facebook, from other sources, even if it is not coming from the official sources. Because the official sources, it will take some time to come to verify. So as a journalist, when I have some information, I will wait for the confirmation. So the information I will have will be just an information. But if any authority confirm it, then it becomes an authentic information which I can rely on, which can save me from any legal action against me. And to be honest with you, the freedom of speech is very subjective. The important thing is that what is people should know about it. For example, if there is a disaster or if there is an accident or if there is anything to happen and the authorities are trying to stop this with various means, I wouldn't want to know what the police is doing against a drug dealer or a drug cartels or some criminal gang. They will release the information at the right time. But if I, as a journalist, knew about this operation, but I will wait, as I said to you earlier on, that when I have a police spokesman or police releasing a press release to us that this is what's happened, we arrested these people, or we recovered £5 million from this criminal gang. So that will be an authentic information. So the element of freedom of speech is very subjective. And also, for example, if you have some corrupt politicians, for example, or corrupt officials, you don't need a newspaper to tell you that these people are because one day or another time, this information will come out. In older days, it used to come after months. Now it comes in days. The flow of information is so fast that the governments in various countries, they have to readjust themselves, because a lot of people have information, but nobody will have the confirmation in front of you. So with regards to the freedom of speech, it is better to stay in your own ground realities, for example. I was your election observer in 2015, and I was talking to your election commissioner. And I asked him, I said, could you please tell me what is your democracy? What does democracy mean to you? And he gave me a very good answer. He said, our democracy is a family democracy. We fight with each other. we eat with each other, we work with each other, and then we live with each other. The percentage of people who were using their vote was much higher than people in the United Kingdom. When we have elections in our country here, we don't have a day off, for example. Our election goes from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the night. And people go to work, and after work or before work, they'll go and vote, or some people will go to the vote by postal. But the number of people who exercised their vote were very low, which means a lot of people have not exercised their vote, democratic vote, to write or to elect a government. But in other countries where large number of people are coming to vote and they're exercising and they're choosing A party or B party, you have as was said, you have a president in China or in Kazakhstan. We have a queen here, but there is a difference between the system of a lot of European countries, for example. They have kings and queens in their background. In Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, there are various. If you can check it out, they all have these monarchs sitting in the back, and they're also democracies as well. But there is a limit of how the system of governance is. The most important thing is because a layperson on the ground, on the street, he doesn't care who is the king or who's the queen. He's interested in his children's education, his safety, his food, his job. These are his priorities. It doesn't matter who's sitting on the top. And that's why we have seen in the past, a lot of umpires were very great. They have done brilliant things in the world. Egyptians and in Mughal and Umayyads in the Middle East and Spanish Moors. There were a lot of science and technology grew in those days, but there was no democracy in those days. Another thing, you will see the European Union flags. If you see the member states, you will see cross on them. And this is a cross, which is a sign of Christianity, for example. So there's no harm in people following their religion, at the same time doing their business as they go along. So this is all about what is projected. So if more people are getting their services, their hospital, education, jobs, people don't care who is doing what. And I think digitalization has been able to improve some system of governance and also stopping corruption. And as a journalist, our role is to ask questions. Because if you ask a question, if you change your statement into a question, then nobody is going to challenge you on that. But we don't make judgments. We are people who ask questions. And nobody is going to say to you, why are you asking this question? And sometimes your question is more important than the other person's or other authorities' answers. But also we don't do angling, for example, that if a protest is happening in Hong Kong, the CNN is showing this protest all the time. But if a protest is happening in Paris, the CNN and News 24 or France 24, they're not talking about it. The French Yellow Vest protest was the biggest protest in Europe, but it was not as shown on CNN or other media outlets as they were showing the protest in Hong Kong or in Thailand. So there is a lot of bias in terms of or selective propagation of the agenda of various interesting parties. I hope it answers, but you can write to me if you want for further clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. Thank you, Nurgul. So today, almost 30 students are attending your lecture, and the video, we are recording the video, and it will be posted on social media. So the next student is also very active, one of my active students. Her name is Şaһid Gul. Şaһid Gul is ready to answer you.
Hello,
Yes,
my name is
Dr.
Şaһid Kul. I'm student of international journalism. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. It's very interesting. I have a question about government funding of mass media. Most media in Kazakhstan are dependent of the state. Many researchers say that because of the low income from advertising. Do you think that if advertising budgets increase, the media will be less dependent of the government?
That's a very good question. The business model of, and I said it to many programs, to even in many countries like India, Pakistan, where governments use media for their projection. They're to show that how wonderful, how great they are. And the media sing the songs at the same time, on the same tune. So the media need to change the business model. So, for example, I see many people from Kazakhstan who are working in PR, public relations. Now, public relations is one part of journalism. Public relations, to be a journalist, you can't be a PR person. A public relation person is the person who is responsible for his company or his departments, what they're doing it. So they are just the loudspeakers. They are telling people what their department is doing. That is not journalism. And so the media outlets, for example, if they made their business model, which is dependent on government advertisements, they will follow the lead of what their sponsors is saying. And that is not just for the government. For example, if I'm taking money or if any organization taking money from any business companies, for example, any private industry, for example, you're taking money from them for advertisement. Advertisement doesn't come only from the government. The advertisement come from the various business oil companies, British Petroleum or gas companies or whoever, banks, for example. So they will try to push their agenda as well. Or if there is a negative story about any bank or any gas company, any construction company, any kind of business venture, they will try to influence your editor saying, can you stop the story? I tell you that when I was a young reporter, there was a storm we had in, and the tower of a TV channel, there was only one private TV channel at the time, and the tower collapsed. So I went with my photographer and we took the picture. I came back to the office. The owner of that TV channel was a friend of my chief reporter. So he called him and he said, your reporter was here. And so can you please help me not to publish the story? So, and I was very upset because I went so far in rain and in windy weather to check the story up. So my editor said, no, we can't stop the story. So we published the story, but how he helped him was we didn't publish the picture. Because as you know, a picture saves 1,000 words. So as a good reporter, I gave the picture to someone else who published the picture, but we published the story. So sometimes we have friends, we live in a society where we have a lot of friends and a lot of business interests, etc. What more important thing is that if you want to venture out into media and become a journalist, always have a second plan B. Always have a second job. Always have something else in your hands, which can complement your everyday life, for example, which can give you a breathing space. So you're not totally dependent on one source of income. And I think this business model is very important. So we cannot blame the government for pushing their agenda. It's our responsibility as well to change our ways of working. So if I'm not dependent on anyone, then I don't need to listen to or I don't need to be influenced by anyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kureshi. Thank you, Gul. And the next student is Aida. After that, Balam is ready. So Aida, ask your question, please.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I have some question on the example of the war in Karabakh. So, for example, when two sides of position themselves as victims, and of course lose their position, how to avoid falling for the so-called fake news, and are they considered such in this case? Because of the so it is legitimate for an opinion to be introduced by a person's worldview. So yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. In a war zone, the freedom of speech and the life safety of a journalist is very important. We cannot, we journalists are not soldiers, or we don't have tanks, we don't have armored personnel carriers to go in a war zone. And therefore, we depend on the information coming from the military sources, whichever side you're on. So if you're on the side of Azerbaijan, they will give you their story, and if you're on the Armenian side, they will give their story, and you are dependent on them. Now, as a journalist, do I need to go in the war zone? The answer is no. I don't need to go into the war zone and risk my life because I don't have a helmet, I don't have a tank, I don't have a armored personnel carrier, and it will be not. It will not be very conducive or very helpful to risk your life. A lot of war correspondents in Syria, in Iraq, in in Afghanistan were killed as a result of it, or maybe sometimes they were in the between the crossfire, or sometimes they were there and something happened. So war reporting is something which is very difficult, but it needs a lot of precautions, a lot of expertise, experience, and we don't get too excited into the thing. So we rely on because the war cannot go for years and years. The war is not going to end. So any operation happening, that operation will end, and then you will know the information afterwards. So your safety is very important. With regards to Nagorno-Karabakh, there were some facts which were known to the words, and if you're reporting as an independent journalist, you will see that Nagorno-Karabakh is a legitimate territory of Azerbaijan, and we have another side who is an occupier, who occupied this territory sometimes in 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we have two parties. One is the perpetrator and one is the victim. We cannot balance those two. So as a journalist, if I'm reporting on this issue, I will be writing that this territory is owned by Azerbaijan, but it is occupied illegally by the Armenians. That is the starting line. But if I am sitting in France or somewhere, Friends of Armenia somewhere, I would be talking about some biblical stories about it. That 6,000 years ago, the Armenian used to live there. Well, that's true. They might be living there, but this is 2020. So, and I was, for example, I was in Almaty last year, and I met Mark Siegel. Mark Siegel is a very famous journalist in New York. He's a professor as well. And we were talking about the Palestinian issue, and he said to me, "Oh, it's in the Bible that Jews always lived in Palestine." I said, "Yes, that's true, but the Zionists don't believe in God, and you can't use Bible as a land document. If I take my a Bible or a Quran saying, well, this says that my family was living here, the government is going to say, well, I cannot use this 3,000 years old or 5,000 years old, something which was said as a land document. The land documents have more, what is the government saying? We have to draw a line where we're going to start and why we are there. So in this issue, the United Nations and has recognized that Nagorno-Karabakh was the territory of Azerbaijan, which was occupied by the Armenians. So I have no defense in the case. If I'm a lawyer, if the Armenians come to me to fight their case as a lawyer, and I will say to them, you have no case to defend. You are there illegally. You're a robber. So if a robber come to your house to rob you, and you defend your house and protect your children, and you do use all the means to protect your family and your children, the moment this robber stepped into your house, he loses all rights. He has no rights whatsoever. So in defense, if you kill that robber, protecting your children, your family, you have every right to do that. Because the moment we all have individual responsibility and the state responsibility. We cannot go into other people's territories, other people's homes, and then claim human rights. Your human rights stops outside the doorsteps of my house, maybe 1-2 meters away from my house, because I don't want anyone invading into my space. That's where my freedom ends. That's where my human rights end. So in UK, we have a very famous case when a farmer shoot a burglar who entered into his house, and there was a court case in the court, and the court says, "But he has a right to defend it. If somebody coming and stealing your property in your house, you have every right to defend yourself. You have every right to protect your goods, and this also goes to the countries as well. So if there are defined boundaries, yes, if there are some issues, we can't go into the small details, but in this situation, I think people have more inclined to the Azerbaijani narrative because it was a UN recognized Azerbaijani territory occupied by the Armenians. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. So, guys, if you have questions, just raise your hands. And the next student is Balum. Balum, go ahead. Louder, please.
Hello.
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 Yeah, that's
good.
Good
Afternoon, doctor. It was a great lecture. Thank you very much. If I don't bother you, I have 2 questions. First, concerns my dissertation theme, and it is about the country PR. You said before that the commercial companies needs PR. That the PR is necessary for commercial companies like BG and so on. And we know that Kazakhstan spends quite a lot of money on publications in international media, campaigns that have been developed and so on. And do you think this is effective? How is it effective? And is there any alternative to the paid publications? And the second question is about the negative words. Just a minute. It's we have such a phenomenon as avoiding negative words, smoothing out religious or national identity in materials nowadays. And do you think that is a pursuit of? Do you think that we lose some meaning in the news itself by extending such words as terrorist, Islamic, Afro-American, and woman, and so on in materials? And what is your general attitude to such substitution of the words in materials?
Okay, thank you. You have 2 parts of your question. question. The first part was, as I understood, was linked with the PR job from of any commercial company. So yes, your job is to promote and your products and your company's image building, and it is and you're using various tools. You're advertising. You're making your own commercial adverts, which you're playing on TVs or social media, etc. And you're also sending that information to the experts or to feeding information to the journalists. So that is not journalism. That is propagation of your product. So this is part of your company's tool. So for example, if you make a new hair dryer, or if you make something new product, you are telling people about your product and how good it is, how cheap it is, how durable, etc. So this is part of the commercial side of propagation into media. So this is not, and for any economic reporter, this is something which they will use it as an advertisement. We call it paid content. So if you send a news, a picture, and we publish that this is your statement. This is what you are telling about your product. So maybe that's why in some companies will have reviews on their below their product, and you will look at the reviews about how people feel about it, and those reviews will give you some understanding. You will make up your mind to go for whether you should buy it or you shouldn't buy it. Your second part of the question was linked with Islamophobia. Islamophobia is very well real. I mean, and that is a very good example of psychological third and fourth generation and fourth and fifth generation psychological warfare. That when a victim of terrorism was portrayed as a terrorist, when you convert a victim into a perpetrator. So the fact is that in last 20 years, since this so-called war on terror, which was in after 9/11, which the Americans started, the most people who were killed were Muslims in Afghanistan, and they went on attacking Libya, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, for example. So these people were killed. They were all Muslims. And those people who were killing, they were non-Muslims, mostly Christians who were doing all this. So Russians are killing people in Syria, so does the Americans, so does the French in Africa, but Muslims are terrorists. An individual action of a person is a criminal act. It's irrelevant what is the religion of that person have. So if a white person is committing a terrorism act in USA, they'll say, oh, well, he has mental health problems, you know, he was unstable, he killed 15 people in a nightclub. They won't call him terrorist. They will say he was mentally disabled, he had mental health problems, he had very disturbed childhood. What is it his childhood got to do with killing 15, 20 people in a nightclub? And that is manipulated. On the other hand, if an individual who's happened to be Muslim, he reacted to something and he committed a crime, his individual crime is labeled on 1.5 billion Muslims. But the second question you ask yourself is that how we got there. It's because the Muslim countries, or the countries where Muslim people live in large numbers, they have not developed their media houses or media tools. They were depending on Reuters, CNN, Fox News, Associated Press. So if I don't have the tools, to counter that narrative, then more people will be listening to this. So the important thing is, for example, in your countries, if they have their own media houses and press agencies and media outlets, then you're not dependent on Reuters or any Western news agencies or Western news tools. You will have your own tools to respond. And the other thing was that most of the journalists didn't ask the right question, or they didn't challenge it. I'll tell you how to challenge it. As a good journalist, if you see a story, for example, in New York Times or in Guardian or in Times in London or in Washington Post, these are major European American news outlets. You write a letter to the editor. Say, I read your story. I don't think it is true. Can you please clarify your position on that? So if you have 5,000 emails going to the editor will be very careful next time to publish that story. In BBC, for example, if you are not happy with something and you believe that it is not true, or it is Islamophobic, it is racist, it is very one-sided, you write an email to the BBC Trust, BBC, all the information is available on the internet. You can write to them and they have to reply to you. For example, over here we have Ofcom. There's a body which look at all the TV channels, radio, other kind of communications. And if you're not happy with something, you can write to them. What you need to do is, if you're seeing something, you take the information that what time it happens, which channel was it, and what was said, a brief summary, and you send an email to Ofcom. Or if it is in a print media, you write to the Press Complaint Commission. So all the countries in Europe and other places, they have these watchdogs, which we call it. They monitor it, and so it needs a little bit proactive approach. So I have said two things here: that you develop your own media so strong that it can challenge the international bullying, and it can challenge the international narrative coming from outside. And we have seen that people are still trying to hold on the information or give you a goody-goody picture. We journalists are not mummy and daddy of anyone. Our role is to give information accurately. And if that information is not harming anyone. So if two people are getting divorced, that how it is important for two people, for a general public, if two people are getting divorced. Well, yes, if they are celebrities, it's good gossip, but it is not something which is for public good. Or are people interested in that? So this is what we call it a filler in our language. This is which will fill in the page for that information. So this Islamophobia was challenged by our Pakistani Prime Minister in the United Nations, and the European Union has also said Islamophobia is illegal. And for example, Macron has gone too far into his anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic narratives. There are historical reasons behind it. During the Crusades, the French were going to fight in Jerusalem against the rulers at the time. So there are a lot of the things which we see very simple. They are not as simple as they look. They have a history behind it. I saw Russian Orthodox priests blessing the nuclear weapons, or blessing the tanks, and blessing the guns, and blessing the soldiers. Now tanks, guns, and soldiers are to kill. They're not doing any good thing. But if the same thing is a Muslim priest is doing to his soldiers, they say, well, look, it's fundamentalist, it's extremism. Well, if a Christian priest is doing it in Ukraine and in Russia, it's not extremism, it's okay. But if a Muslim is praying, then it is maybe he's extremism, or he is radicalized. This is the word they use. I don't know what it means, but they think it's so. If a church, I have seen the pictures of Russian priests, or in, for example, in USA, US soldiers were all the military units. They have a priest in their military. They do prayers every Sunday, or every time they ask, they can see their church, or they can see the priest. That is not, they don't call it radicalization. So I agree with you that is an unfair world. But in the end, the buck stops with the people. They need to improve themselves. They need to improve their media. They need to improve their media agencies, and they need to create more strong, robust, highly qualified journalists who can stand up on international platforms and ask questions. But if you are creating an army of PR people, the PR people don't do journalism. For a journalist, you have to go in the field and ask tough questions. Nobody is going to blame you for asking tough. I think you probably have seen them when an American Chinese journalist asked questions to President Trump, and he said to her, he thought she's from China, and she wasn't. She was from USA, and she told him off. How dare you label me as a Chinese journalist? She wasn't. She was a US journalist. So her appearance made the president felt that she could be from China, but she wasn't. So these are the things, and she was very bravely. She was good. She stood up and she told him off. She said, "No, what are you talking about?" So these kind of confidence, will only come to you if you go and work in the field. If you give questions to you, and to be honest with you, in international media, for example, if we go to number 10, our Prime Minister House, or all these big press conferences, most of the questions they already know, and they already know who's going to ask the question. So they are very well scripted. They're not as if you feel that they were just somebody raised the hand and they asked. No, it doesn't. If you ask a question to a president or a prime minister, you go to the press officer first and say, I want to ask a question to the president. They'll ask you, what are your question about? And then you obviously ask the question. So this, maybe in your TV channels, you see somebody raise the hand and ask the question. Most of the time, the questions were already given to the journalists, to be fair or to be direct with you. And that is because of the policy issues. But they do ask, random journalists will ask questions on the doorstep or outside. So I always believe in empowering the journalists, making those strong, confident journalists with international exposure. So if you go to attend or travel internationally, obviously your confidence is going to boost up. You will not be looking at a press officer from a government department or a company to tell you what question you're going to ask. So the buck stops inside you. So if for example, your country develop your own media so strong, then you won't be depending on information coming from Russia or from London or from New York about your country. You will have your own information firsthand. Pick up a phone and call someone, say, what is going on? And they will give you this information. I hope it answers the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kureshi. So, guys, if you have any questions, just raise your hands. So next student is Dana, and with Mr. Janibek and Darbay Arujan will ask after Dana. So Dana, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very useful today to listen to your speech. And I have a question according to the fake news that we spoke before. So recently there was some, can you hear me? Excuse me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, so recently there was some changes in Kazakhstan approach in media. First of all, using fact-checking tools, and secondly, an article on defamation was decriminalized in our country, but despite this, it is now under the administrative code of the Republic of Kazakhstan and being charged a large fine. So how do you think if it is effective? Because there are still many fakes by press and social media users, and what can actually be done by the government to increase public awareness and responsibility for information they share and get every day?
Very long question. Okay.
Sorry.
The government in UK, every department has a website, and you go to Foreign and Commonwealth Office, you go to Ministry of Defense, Home Office, all the offices, they have their own website, and they have their own where they share the news. Now, the government departments cannot give you news every day. They will give you news as and when something happens. And so they will release their press release on their website. So you can go on their website and you can check what they're saying. And based on their information, you can ask questions. So I advise mostly the students, you ask questions, write your question and send it to them, and wait for the answer.
Okay, thank you. But what about the defamation?
Send a right reminder. What about what? Sorry,
Excuse me, the connection is very
that.
poor. So I was asking about the defamation, the decriminalization of defamation, but putting it in administrative code under a large fine. Do you think it is effective by preventing the fake news exploding on the internet, or, for example, in news in general?
Well, that is exactly what I'm saying. We have a lot of media groups in UK who were fined by Ofcom for spreading the news which was not true or which was half truth, and I don't know if you have any watchdog in your country who will monitoring your media, your news or your TV, radio, etc. The large fines are given because they want to stop people doing it again. Because if they just tell you don't do it, you will do it again. But when you have a fine, then you will remember it, and then you will verify it. So this is not for disinformation. Spreading disinformation is illegal. We shouldn't be. It's like somebody lying about me or lying about you. So how would you feel if somebody tell something which is not true? So our role is, as a journalist, is to verify it. And to verify, if I have a story, even if I'm there, so take an evidence, take a camera. Now people are taking videos, and police in France, for example, last week, there was a law they wanted to pass about not to make police videos when they are doing an operation. And we saw on social media the police was how they were beating a black African French, or how they were treating Muslim women in hijab. And these videos were creating a lot of unrest in the masses, in the public. So the police wanted to stop this, but the people said, no, we will continue with this. But as long as it is not jeopardizing your safety, i.e. the person who's making it, and jeopardizing the ongoing operation, you have every right to do it. What I'm saying is that your news needs to be authentic. Okay, if you made a mistake, you acted on information you had at the time, then you can always clarify it. Say, we are sorry, we published this story at the time, this is the information available, but we found out today that now this information is not true. So you publish your clarification. So there is always a way. And as I said earlier, we're not prosecutors, we're not judges, we're journalists, we're reporters. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. Thank you, Dana. And Guldaria Irkhanovna would like to ask you. Are you here? Guldaria Irkhanovna?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead,
Thank you very
please.
much for a very, very interesting and useful lecture. You mentioned that we have to ask question if we something misunderstand. That's why I'm asking you, can you show an example of the fake news and false news?
Okay, in the beginning, I give you an example of the WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. That was a fake news and a false news at the same time, because weapons of mass destruction never existed. They were not there. And so it was fake and also false. Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, but millions of people were killed and the country was destroyed. And in the current scenario, this is the, I mean, the responsibility of a news is the reporter's responsibility. That's why a lot of editors don't publish the story. Sometimes the reporters work hard, but the editors don't publish it. And that create problems, because the editor think, if I don't publish the story, there's no problem. There's no question. But the only problem will arrive when you publish a story. Somebody will come and ask you. So always have a backup. Always have facts to back up your story. If somebody said in an interview, record it. If somebody says something, send you in writing. Email it to you. So you have an evidence. People will say, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean it. So we'll say, okay, this is your quote. This is what you said. So the fake news is and false news is there is a very fine line between it. That if you know the half truth, for example, if there is an accident somewhere, or there's and you said the government said 3 people died as a result of accident, 15 people injured, but somebody published it, 200 people died and 500 injured. So there was an incident, but someone exaggerated it, magnified it, made it into a big, to create panic. Obviously, people will be worried about their. So, for example, when something happened in Paris, so everyone was changing their Facebook page, DP, I am with Paris, pray for Paris, pray for. But if anything happened in Iraq or in Syria or in somewhere else, or in Afghanistan, nobody's praying for them. Do you think they don't need prayers? They do. But it depends on whose side you are on. Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh issue is very real, very recent for us. So there was people have called. I had an incident when some professor contacted me and he wrote me. He said, you published the interview of an Armenian professor. I want to do. I said, by all means, please do. And he said, we published this interview. So it required that how accurate we are. If you're not sure about something, don't publish it. Because you're not sure about it, wait for more information. Nobody's going to blame you. This breaking news culture is also very problematic, because when you go for defending your, in terms of race of breaking news and getting more rating for your TV channel, people are doing all kind of silly things. I hope it clarified the question you asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Guldaria. Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. So Arujan wanted to ask a question. Arujan, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Kureshi, we are very nice to see you in our video conference today. I have two questions for you. So the first one is about today's topic. It's about fake news. So I defended my thesis work, like diploma, for on fact-checking news, but it was based on South Korean practice. And now I understand all the things that you said about fake news in terms of journalist or reporter. So we need to be like responsible for the news that we share or represent. Yeah. But what about ordinary people? How they can identify fake news that, you know, now in social media is more massive than TV channels or than official websites. So that is the first question. And the second one, like as we are studying in international journalism faculty, and also I'm working in international portal in Kazakhstan. I want to ask about like the work of BBC journalists. Like, how is can you tell more about working process of ordinary BBC journalists? So thank you.
The first part is what I understood. As I said earlier, every newspaper, news TV channel, or even a Facebook or media tool, they have a help button, or they have a button which you can press. There is a problem, you can complain about it. For example, if you don't like any news on Facebook, which you think is not good, you can click on the right-hand corner. There will be option. It will ask you various options. You can write your comment. You can say, I don't like this. It is untrue. It is offensive. And then it will go to the organizer or to the originator of this tool, this portal, for example, Facebook. So all the news organizations or social media outlets, they all have this. They have to have this tool. YouTube, for example, they have this option as well, that if you think you don't like something, or you think something is offensive to you, you can always complain. And what I want to our younger generation journalists to develop these skills in them, to challenge it. If you don't like something, if you think it's untrue, challenge it. Because editors will be careful next time. If an editor receives 10, 15, 20 emails every day about a reporter, he will check the story again. And in UK, in newspapers, for example, or in the BBC, we have a legal department. Every newspaper have lawyers. So if you're publishing a story, you send the story to your lawyers first, who will look at it. Once the lawyer says the story is okay, we can back up in a court, you publish it. Same thing with the BBC. If you are doing a documentary or you're saying any news, the BBC don't create news. We journalists, we don't create news. We just inform it. We're the messengers. And as we say in English, don't shoot the messengers. Our role is to do our job credibly and accurately. So people who are, and from the legal point of view, I must reiterate that if you're writing a story, just think about it. What if this story goes in the court? How will I defend it? What backup, what evidence do I have to defend myself? Same like if you are writing a reference, writing a thesis, so you write a reference, quote unquote. So these are not your words, these are quotations. And you write the quotations on the bottom. So you're defending yourself. If somebody challenges you, so where did you get this information? And you say, I got it from this source. And make sure that source is authentic. Some authentic book, some credible newspaper, credible news person. And that is that will lead to your safety. So I'm sure you have a lot of criminal mafias in your country as well who will be dealing in drugs, crimes, etc. And so these, if you publish about a story about them, check with the police. What do they think? Check with your lawyers. What do they think? So, and also keep yourself safe as well, and send them a question as well. Say, we are publishing this story. What do you think? Is it true? So you cover all the corners. You won't say that, or nobody's going to say to you, well, you didn't ask me this question. You say, well, I sent you the question. You have you can write a reply now. If you're not happy with something, you want to correct the facts, you do. So it is all about responsible journalism. And with regard to the BBC, BBC is a public funded body. We all pay license fees every month. BBC is not a private organization. It's not a business organization. That's why you don't see any advertisements on BBC channels. BBC is paid by all of us, all the taxpayers or all the people who have TV at home, they pay for that. So the BBC model is very different than the in any commercial TV channel or any private TV channel which is not state funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjan. Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. So, dear friends, it's really professional journalist, and if you have any questions, so maybe it's about your study, about your dissertation or thesis statement, so please ask and use this opportunity. And Aygerim wants to ask you, Aygerim?
Yes. I want to ask about my dissertation topic. My dissertation topic is related to media founding sources. Now many Western media outlets are switching to a paid subscription. Are you going with the editors to switch to this method, and what do you think about such a transition in general?
Since we moved from paper journalism to online, and that has changed. For example, now you're doing shopping online because of the corona. We're not going out in the market to do our shopping. We want our things to be delivered to us. So the subscription-based media is to save journalists for you. How you will pay, how will you run the business, how will you pay the salaries to your staff, and that is a contribution, your contribution to the flow. If you want a authentic and good quality information, we will. It's like buying a book, for example. If you want to buy a good book from a good writer who will work hard for 2-3 years on a research, so you pay for it. But before you were paying on going to the bookshop, buying a book, bringing home. Now you pay online and get the book in on your computer. The same, but the meaning and the tool is different. So the subscription is the same as you have newspaper delivered to your door every day. I don't know how it works in Kazakhstan, but in many countries there are news. Some young students used to deliver newspapers to people's houses. I don't know if it happens in your country. Every morning or afternoon, the students will go and throw newspapers on people's houses and get paid. But now we are not throwing newspapers to people's houses, we're getting on the computer. So this is the new changing business model of intellectual property. So what you write in your story is your property. It's not in a shape of a house or a car or a building, but this is your intellectual property, and you should be paid for your hard work.
Thank you. So Bakhtgul, your turn. Please ask a question.
Okay, I also want to know about the topic of my dissertation. My thesis reference to copyright protection on the internet. In Kazakhstan, there is not clear legislation in this area. How are you copywriting regulated in your country? How are copywriting protected on the internet in your country?
As I said to you, that Ofcom is an organization which deals with the complaints and issues of copyrights. We have patents here, a company, an office which do the patency of, and for example, if you buy content from the BBC, you have to pay for it. You have to take their permission before using for your documentary, and they have some charges for this. I don't know exactly how much. Copyright is about protecting you and protecting the person who is writing about it. So, and it is more about credibility. That if you acknowledge, there is always you can always write to the editor, say, I'm writing this. If you look at the Reuters page and they go to their news, in the bottom they will write something about it, and they will say to you, these are our terms and conditions. If you are using our news, this is what you need to do, and then you follow that. Reuters is a subscription-based news agency, but it is always safe to ask. I don't know, the copyright legislation is always about if do I need to pay for this, or do I need to just mention? So it is more about intellectual honesty, that you're saying, I read this statement in this book. This is the name of the book. This is the page number, and that's it. So you're saving yourself. You're being honest. You're saying, this is not my words. This is somebody else's work, and then you move forward. And always ask questions. If you're not sure about something, ask questions. Don't live in confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bakhtgul. Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. So a few minutes left to the end of today's session. So we are about to finish. So one more question, please, guys.
May I?
Yes.
I read that you worked at Al Jazeera. In the future, I want to write about politics and become an international journalist. I ask you to give some advice on working for international media and tell you about the specifics of work.
Always to write good things, you need to read good things. For a good writer, you need to be a good reader. So if you read good quality books, your mind, your views will always be very accurate and authentic. I will share something. I received an article from someone, and I read the article, and it was very bad English. It doesn't make sense. So I wrote back to her. I said, can you please read? I was very polite. I didn't say that your article is rubbish, because English is a language. So I'm not expert in Kazakh or Russian, but you're good in Kazakh and Russian. You're good, more confident in your language. But for me, it was very difficult to read and to understand all this. So always write in something in which you feel more confident. So you are clear about your thoughts, you are sure what you're writing. But if you're writing in an international language, for example, you're writing in English, then you need to read more English articles, stories, books. You need to watch more English programs and documentaries. Al Jazeera is a very good channel. You can watch TRT, you can watch BBC, and they are very, very authentic. Or CGTN, your neighbor Chinese. RT is very good, the Russian channel. They are very good quality programs and documentaries. So it's like machine, you know. If you put one thing from one side and you get another good thing from another side. So if you feed in yourself with good information, good knowledge, you will automatically start producing same kind of things. So if you, and I think if you watch CGTN, for example, or you watch RT, and if you watch CNN, the tone is different. I get very anxious when I'm watching Fox News. People are shouting at each other. But when I go to CGTN, they're talking very slowly, calmly. Or if you watch TRT, or if you want to RT, their tone their pitch go high, it makes you anxious. Raising your voice does not make your argument stronger. Your argument is stronger with the knowledge you have. So more reading, spend some time watching these channels, look at the news, what they're talking about, read. Reading is very important at the initial time and ask questions, write down your question. Most of the times I see people, if you're going to a press conference or somewhere press briefing, write down your question and read it, no problem with it. Because sometimes people get confused when they're standing up with a microphone, they forget about it, a lot of things. So the best thing is write down your question, because your question is more important than the answer given by your expert or whoever it is. And you can have further discussion via your tutor. You can get in touch and we can have further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kureshi. So I hope all participants enjoyed from today's lecture. So, and thank you for accepting our invitation. And I know you're really busy journalists. And guys, if you like to have, if you have more questions, you can find Dr. Kureshi's account on the social media, and you can contact him directly. So yes, thank you again for your time, and hope to see you in Kazakhstan in Eurasian University. So and have a nice day, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Thank you.
Спасибо и до свидания, ребята. До следующей недели.
До свидания.
До свидания.